staying a Christian while doing youth ministry. So my name's Jeanne, and wow, I'm so glad you showed up. I've been doing this youth ministry thing for a little over 4 fulfilling decades. But it's still pretty amazing to me how easy it is to become, in the middle of ministry, a poser. Not on purpose, but the church world celebrates easily your giftedness way more than your character. So no matter how spiritual you are, if you really are interested in doing this thing for real, I think this is a pretty serious question. How do you stay a Christian while being in the middle of ministry, period, especially for our purposes, youth ministry? Let me tell you a true story that'll give you a background that we're going to talk about. It was autumn of 1992, and a guy named Michael Plant, who was a real popular American yachtsman, began a solo crossing of the North Atlantic Ocean. He was going from the U.S. to France. And it was about 2 weeks into the trip, and something went wrong. And Michael Plant and his sailboat were lost at sea. Now, when they had sent Michael Plant off, there was a real enthusiastic farewell, champagne, all the media there, no reason to fear. Number one, they were waving farewell to an expert. He had done missions like this several times before. He was renowned, not just in America, but in the whole world for his skill as a yachtsman. Secondly, his sailboat, which was called the Coyote, was state of the art. At that time, there was really none better. And third, and remember, this is many years ago, he had a new technology. It was an emergency positioning radio, which was a new deal then. 4 short signal blasts from the radio would be enough for ground stations to determine a fix on Michael Plant's location. So in reality, Michael Plant had nothing but the best of everything. And people, as they waved farewell to him, thought nothing could go wrong with his big voyage. But something did go wrong. And 11 days into the excursion, radio contact was lost. And at first, there wasn't much concern because there was no SOS, and they just thought, hey, there's some storms at sea about where he is. He'll get back in touch after he navigates them. But finally, they launched a search, and days continued with still no signals, no sightings. And then the news they never expected. The Coyote was found floating upside down, but not a single sign of Michael Plant. It was weeks later that they finally found his dead body brought to shore. Now, what makes that true story pretty amazing is that if you know anything about sailboats, you know that they don't normally go upside down. Sailboats very rarely capsize, even when the wind and the storms are pretty rough. So how could that have happened? In order for a sailboat not to capsize in even really, really rough seas, there's really only one very simple requirement. There must be more weight below the waterline than there is above it. Did you get that? It's really important, so let me say it again. There has to be more weight below the waterline than there is above it. And any violation of this brings about disaster. And it's what happened in Michael Plant's case. And I think it's a great picture in youth ministry of our challenge to stay a Christian while being in the middle of doing youth ministry. Because see, it's easy in life, in Christianity, in ministry, and in youth ministry to get a bunch of weight above the waterline. And that's what I'm going to call the image stuff. You know, the stuff that people see on the outside, like how you speak and what a good communicator you are and how you can move a crowd. or how you look, or how large your youth group is in attendance, or how cool you come across, or who thinks you're cool. I mean, there are just a million visible tokens. And I think they're all things above the waterline that people can see. Kind of like the Coyotes State of the Art had all the coolest things. You can have the coolest youth group, the best technology, the coolest team, the largest attendance. Put in 21st century vernacular, the above the waterline things are your image. It's the parts of you as a youth pastor, youth leader, that people around you usually can see. But the all-important stuff, the below the waterline things that keep you from sinking when the storms come, those are the things that keep you for real, keep you authentic in your relationship with Christ. And usually those things are pretty invisible to most all human eyes. What would the beneath the waterline, below the waterline things be? Stuff like if you have a consistent quiet time most days. None of us are perfect, but gosh, way too easy to do ministry a long time and be really inconsistent except for when you are trying to get a sermon. Or then your internal attitudes. Or then what really motivates you. Why you're real in doing ministry in the first place, who you most want to please. Or stuff like how you handle it when people treat you wrongly, unfairly. Because the essence of Christianity still is about going to the cross. Or stuff like how easily you take correction, even when somebody doesn't give it a good way. Or maybe it's your inward attitude towards those that God has placed in authority over you. I mean, the list is limitless. But most of those things are largely inward. They're not above the waterline things. You can have what looks like a great youth ministry, be a great communicator, have a bunch of kids coming, and most of the things I just said be all out of line. Because see, the below the waterline stuff is all inward and not visible. And I think it is way easier to be a good youth leader, a good youth pastor, than it is to be a good Christ follower. And like I said earlier, unfortunately, the church world gives most of its acclaim and its reward to people that are better above the waterline. And I don't know that I hear a whole lot about below the waterline stuff. So in brief, let me share 3 marks of what I'll call an image manager, because that's the above the waterline guy. That's the guy that's going to struggle to stay in ministry of any kind and stay a real Christ follower. And for our scriptural stereotype, let me use the grand champion image manager from the Old Testament, and that is no less than King Saul. 1 Samuel 11 verse 6 says this. It says, "Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon Saul mightily." Then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him mightily. And then it's just a few chapters later, it's 1 Samuel starting, a little later where it says, "The Lord did not answer Saul." And then Saul said to his servants, "Seek for me a woman who is a medium, a witch, that I may go to her and inquire of her." Just see the huge difference? Saul started as a guy who really sought the Lord and really wanted to please the Lord. And then, no telling how many years later into his reign as the king, following Jehovah, he's the guy that's saying, "Find a witch for me, because I can't get answers from God. Somebody's got to give me an answer. Find a witch and ask her what I need to be doing." So first of all, image managers start things in the spirit, kind of like Saul did, but over the long haul, they maintained them in the flesh. It's just really easy to start youth ministry in the Spirit, to pray and ask God for His leadership before you preach, and then after you get a little experience underneath your belt, you're waiting to the last minute and grabbing anything and kind of punting with it. You know, it's really easy to start, a camp or a retreat or a program in the Spirit, pray over it, have it come into being because you really felt like the Lord wanted you to do that, and then over time, all you do is just repeat it because you do one of those every stinking year. It's just really easy to take anything that we do, and I'm not trying to over-spiritualize stuff, but like Saul, who started pursuing the Lord and then, became the guy that's asking for counsel from a witch because he can't get Jehovah to answer. Eventually, that aspect of ministry comes out of nothing but your own ability. Though obviously your own abilities are always going to be there. Watchman Nee says an amazing line. He says, "It's precisely where you are gifted that you are dangerous." So you know what? If you're a worship leader and you're gifted at leading worship, be careful because it's going to be easy to start it praying and giving yourself to the Lord, doing it in the Spirit, and then over time to become just your own person because you really don't need the Holy Spirit because you're gifted enough. Same with speaking ability or leadership ability or being a little bit of a youth or college and career Pied Piper. Wherever you're gifted, be careful because if you're not aware of it, you begin to do all that stuff just with nothing but your own ability. And then there's 1 Samuel 15, verses 10 and 11. It's the account where Samuel was up all night praying. And so Samuel is our contrast to Saul, He's up all night praying, seeking God. And then verse 12 of 1 Samuel 15 says that Saul was busy, not praying. He was busy building a monument to his own honor. I did an awesome night on the first night of Canvas, my last National Youth Leaders Conference that you might want to download, called Superstar Come Down. Kind of goes with all this. It kind of comes along with point 2 where I say image managers more fear losing the approval of man than the approval of God. Saul was building his own image, and Samuel was up seeking the face of God. It's really easy, I don't care who you are, to begin to fight more seriously to keep your image intact than your integrity. To care a little bit too much about what other people think, and hey, we all do. Come on, if you don't care what anybody else thinks, then you probably have a few opposite kinds of problems. But little by little, we confuse what people think with what God knows about us. And so we slowly begin to convince ourselves that the ends justifies the means. If we slant truth a little bit to make that joke funnier so that the crowd is with us, if we don't quite turn in, we use some of that money for our own personal usage, but after all, we use some of our own money anyway. Whatever it is, it's just really easy to want to look good on the outside and not be so terribly careful about how we look on the inside to the Lord. 1 Samuel 15 also gives an account where Saul is told by Jehovah to destroy all of Amalek. They conquered Amalek, and Jehovah says, listen, that means destroy the cattle, destroy all the possessions of the people in Amalek and all the people. Saul destroys Amalek in the name of Jehovah, but then it tells us that he looks and he sees this great livestock and he says, oh, that would be a waste to kill all that livestock. And he sees even some of the treasure that has, and he says, it would be a waste if I got rid of all that treasure, so I'm going to save a little of the best livestock and a little of the best treasure rather than doing exactly what God told me to do. And I want you to catch what happens when Samuel the prophet confronts Saul with his disobedience. I really want you to catch it. It says, then Saul said to Samuel, I did obey the voice of the Lord. I mean, it was just like he was so convinced himself that he had done what Jehovah had told him. No, he hadn't. He had blatantly disobeyed, but he's looking right at the prophet and saying, I did obey the voice of the Lord. So that's my last thought today. Image managers, number 3, often find that their made-up image happens gradually, becomes more real than their personal reality. I hope you heard that. Because it happens to all of us. You know, little by little, you go 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, where your time with the Lord is almost non-existent. But then when you're up front, you're talking like you're this mighty man or woman of prayer, and you got this word from God and blah, blah, blah. And oh gosh, do we all miss quiet times? Absolutely. Do we all have seasons where we're ashamed that our discipline alone with the Lord is not greater? Absolutely. And I often say to myself, listen, it's better to be consistent. What I call with the teenagers, your 10 and 10. 10 minutes in the Word and 10 minutes in prayer each day. And then let it gradually extend. It's better to be consistent than waiting till you have a full hour and then sometimes way too many days go past. But see, little by little, our made-up image feels real to us. And slowly, if you don't grab on to it, the internal question that began as, am I for real? Which I think any conscientious person will think from time to time, We know our own failings, our own flaws, our own double-mindedness. Am I for real? Slowly, if you let it go very long, Saul, that question changes to, is this whole thing for real? Those times like where you're sharing a message and the thought is screaming in your head, you're a hypocrite because you violated some of the principles of the message that you're preaching yourself. All that stuff that the enemy delights to have resonate in our heads. So how do you stay a Christian while doing youth ministry? Hey, if I were honest, I would say it's maybe not as easy as people act like sometimes if you want to do it long haul. Because like I've said before, ministry success can give you a remarkable substitute for spiritual success if you're willing to let it happen. It's super easy to have more weight be above the waterline in the areas that people can see, the size of your youth group, who thinks you're cool, how people respond when you give the invitation, what kind of a youth room you have, how cool and trendy your tech is. All the areas that people see, that's above the waterline. Instead of giving the real focus to beneath the waterline in all the arenas that nobody really knows about except you and Jesus. Like your consistency and your time alone with Him. So let me review the 3 things I mentioned. Image managers start things in the spirit, but over the long haul, they maintain them in the flesh. Number 2, image managers more fear losing the approval of man than the approval of God. And boy, isn't that easy for all of us. And then number 3, image managers often find that their made-up image gradually, even inside of themselves, becomes more real than their personal reality. There is no gift you can give to your youth ministry, to your leaders, More importantly, no gift you can give to yourself or your family that's any more important than fighting for your own spiritual reality. And it is a fight. And anybody who doesn't admit that is not being truthful.